my goodness, it's so great to see you.
Good afternoon.
Welcome back to Vegas. When's the last time you were here?
In Vegas,
God.
2 days ago. No, it must be
3 years?
4 years.
4 years.
I love coming here.
Oh yeah.
I really do like coming to Las Vegas.
No, we know. You're so busy all the time. It's good to be a working actor.
Well, it's everything. It becomes less so in my life. I think that I allowed my job to overwhelm everything else for too long. By the way, I apologize for my voice. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just too much flying and tiredness, but I'm fine. Because I know you were very concerned about me. I'm fine. Unless any of you have a cure for vertigo. If you have a cure for vertigo, that's why you saw me walking so slowly out here. I got it 5 months ago and it doesn't go away. So you with a miracle out there, just let me know. Shout it out and I'll be eternally indebted. Oh, lots of you, that's good. But Las Vegas aside, I am very happy to be here and happy to be at a creation convention and very happy that Adam invited me. It's true, other than a fairly brief appearance about 6 weeks ago at a convention in Montreal, which I attended because the convention center was actually about 50 yards away from where I was living, because I was filming in Montreal and I went to that one. But these days, it's mostly a matter of availability, Adam, that the opportunity to meet with fans and more than that, even with respect, is to be reunited with my dearest friends from the show. And my posse, yes. And I've just received the news that Jonathan Frakes is not going to make it. Their plane's cancelled or something. I said he should have hired a private plane and flown himself down. But being with the gang, we all had dinner last night, and it was just the most delightful and pleasant and fun and beautiful evening for a long time.
Wow.
And I'm happy to be here.
And we're happy to be here. So in the process of preparing myself for this and looking forward to seeing you, I did a pretty exhaustive review of your life and your wonderful catalog and canon of work and some of the things that have gone on with you. And if you'll share a few of these things with us, I'm sure we'd all be very grateful. But I kind of wanted to start with Cam Lane and Muirfield, noting that Cam Lane is was one of your corporate entities. I always wondered what Cam Lane meant. And this is where you grew up?
Yes, it's curious, Adam, that you should bring that up, because sitting at the sign-in table just now, to my astonishment, someone brought along something that I had never seen before. And that was a photograph of me standing in front of the house that I was born in and that I grew up in until I was 15. And it looks nothing like the house that I lived in, because it's been kind of upgraded a little bit. But that was house number 17 in Cam Lane, Muirfield, the West Riding of Yorkshire. And when I created a loan-out company for my work, I had no idea what to call it. And then I remembered that whenever I was with my brothers and they had come to see me in a play or something pleasant or exciting had happened to me, one of my brothers would always say, "Oh, Patrick, it's a long way from Cam Lane." And I thought that should be the name of my company. So Cam Lane Inc. is very much alive and active.
You had a complicated childhood, would that be safe to say?
A little complicated, yeah.
Yeah. But coming out of some of those experiences, I think, helped shape you, the kind of guy that you are, and the kinds of things that you try and do to help other people, too.
Yes, life was a little bit chaotic. Looking at this photograph of my childhood home again, just an hour or so ago, and someone said to me, "Which one was your bedroom?" And I pointed at that, and I said, I slept in that bed, in the same bed with my brother for 15 years, because there was no other space. The house was what was called a one up, one down. Have you heard that before? You have. Because I'm sure you have them probably here in the United States. There was one room downstairs and a door that opened from the outside straight into the room, and there was a flight of stone steps, and there was one room upstairs. And that's how I lived for 15 years, modestly. But when my father came back from the Second World War in 1945, when he retired from the British Army, retiring as a superstar because he was Regimental Sergeant Major of the Parachute Regiment, and a pretty formidable man. His life took a downturn. He had had huge responsibility for the previous few years and was a man of some importance and significance, and in 24 hours all that was gone. He was just an out-of-work man living in a one-up, one-down house. With a child he'd hardly seen. I was by then 5 years old. And I was brought up by my mother and her parents. And things got a bit uncomfortable because he was unhappy and frustrated. And what I only learned a few years ago was suffering seriously from PTSD.
Which isn't hard to fathom, all things considered. I mean, my dad had it too.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, the problem for men of that generation is that not only was it not recognized, there was absolutely no treatment for it at all. And my father would just have been told, "Come on, Alfred Stewart, pull yourself together and be a man." That's not the solution to post-traumatic stress disorder. And
that's also a particularly British thing too.
Well, it is.
The stiff upper lip.
The stiff upper lip. I wish the British could sometimes uncurl those stiff upper lips. But it's so, you know, it was frustrating and things were a little difficult.
Well, now, how did you fall onto the path of being an actor? Where did this first begin, and then how did that lead into your formal training?
Because I had an English teacher. How many English teachers in the audience? Hello, my dear. Right here. Well, hello. Cecil Dormand was his name. He's now in his mid-90s. Wow. And we spoke on the telephone 2 weeks ago.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. He called me to say, "Patrick, I'm worried about you. You're doing too much. You need to take some time off. You need to look after yourself better." And of course, my instinct is to say, "Yes, sir, of course." He's a wonderful, wonderful individual. And Cecil Dormand was the first man to put a copy of Shakespeare into my hand. Cecil Dormand was the first man to put me in a play with adults. And Cecil Dormand was the first person to say to me, "Patrick, have you ever thought of taking this up professionally, acting?" And no one had, and I thought the suggestion was ridiculous because nobody in my community, nobody in my society went into show business. They just didn't. They either went down the coal mine or they went into heavy industry.
Shipyards.
Well, there was no shipbuilding where I was because I lived right in the middle of England and there was no real demand for ships. We had a canal.
That doesn't count.
No, it doesn't count. But there were canal boats, and one of my ambitions has been that before I move on to another life, I might own a canal boat, because I used to love taking my family on canal holidays when I was small. But it seemed to me to be a preposterous suggestion. But 2 years later, when I was 17 and I had failed in my job as a very, very junior, very inept newspaper reporter, I applied for drama school and was accepted. But that was not the most important thing. My family had no money, so they could not afford to send me to school, to drama school. And I applied for a local authority grant. And I needed everything because they couldn't even afford my rent or food or lodging, anything like that. And I went for an interview with my local councillors, who asked me questions like, and forgive the dialect, but this is how we talked where I grew up. Now, Sithy, Patrick, suppose if we give thee all this money, what bloody good is that going to be to us? I mean, what return are we going to get for it? Very, very typical response from a Yorkshireman. And I tried to explain to them that if I was at all successful, I would do everything in my power to bring back what I had learned and whatever skills I had acquired being trained to my local community. Well, I didn't. But it stayed with me that I had made that promise. And 12 years ago, my local university took me out to lunch and said, Patrick, how would you feel if we were to offer you the chancellorship of the university? Well, I'd left school at 15 with 0 qualifications. And here I was being invited to be chancellor of my local university. And I accepted in an instant. And the 11 and a half years I was chancellor gave me some of the grandest experience of my life. But more important, it gave me an opportunity to keep that 60-year-old promise that I would go back and make some kind of a contribution.
So, thus began first a flirtation and then a full-fledged obsession with the stage. And
it's nice that you call it a flirtation, because that's what it felt like, if only because one of the things I quickly discovered about doing amateur theatricals was you got to meet some very nice young women. And actually, I've heard other actors from my community say similar things. It was a very pleasant part of the job.
when did you finally get to West End? I mean, you know, playing on the West End that's big stuff. Was it?
It was a long time.
Antony and Cleopatra, was that it?
No, it was long before that. I worked exclusively in the theatre for 15 years maybe, and quite a few of those years spent with the Royal Shakespeare Company. And it was with them that I went into the West End of London first as a member of the RSC. And so that wasn't commercial West End, because we were a national company. And conditions were very different between that organization and the way commercial theatre in London was run. And that must have been about 1968, 69. And I was absolutely thrilled. I didn't make my commercial appearance on a London stage until after I'd finished filming Star Trek, and that was 2003, was my first commercial appearance.
Now, did you do work in Stratford-on-Avon? How does the Royal Shakespeare Company where do they cite themselves?
In what sense?
Well, I mean, I know that there's a lot of Shakespeare done at Stratford-on-Avon as opposed to London.
That used to be true, but in fact, I think there's probably more Shakespeare being performed now in London than there has been for a long time. But for a very long time, it was exclusively, except for those occasional productions at the National Theatre, it was the role of the RSC to bring Shakespeare to London. And those were the most formative years of my life, because not only did I work on plays by our greatest ever dramatist writing in English, but it was really the beginning of my proper education, because I was surrounded by people who had been to university, most of them to Oxford or Cambridge. And these were my directors, the business managers of the theatre, and many of my colleagues. Ian McKellen, who is now, as maybe some of you are aware, is a very close friend and colleague.
Yeah. We'll get to him.
Ian was a Cambridge undergraduate, where there was me from a secondary modern school with 0 qualifications, and I was intimidated by them. But I kept my mouth shut and I kept my ears wide open. And I was bombarded with brilliant conversation, brilliant dialogue. People packed with ideas, creative ideas and organizational ideas. And truly, that's when my education took off, when I was surrounded by those people. And still it continues to this day.
Must have been satisfying to do Waiting for Godot with him all those years later, right?
Yeah, it was. I do apologize for my voice. You can only imagine how wretched this makes me feel. My voice is the one thing that's held me together for so many years, and right now it's not too good.
No, yeah, it'll come back. It'll come back. Now we're gonna, because we have a lot of people that have a lot of questions. Forgive me if I'm gonna skip around your career a little bit, just to touch on a couple of few things. I'm fascinated by David Lynch, and I was fascinated by the movie Dune. And I thought Journey was a pretty good character, but I'd like to kind of get your thoughts on that. What it was like working with David and that production, which was a difficult production from what I've understood.
I think it might have been difficult for some people. There was an awkwardness for me because of the circumstances under which I had been cast. The fact is that when David Lynch cast me, which was an emergency procedure because they had had to let another actor go, which is a euphemism for being fired, and I came in at very short notice. I was already working on a movie in Europe, all over Europe, and so they had to organize me flying continuously backwards and forwards from Mexico City to Frankfurt, from Mexico City to Geneva, from Mexico City to Brussels. And that went on for about 6 weeks. But the fact is, David, who I admired then and admired today enormously, David Lynch, believed he was getting somebody else. Because the Patrick Stewart he had seen backstage after a matinee of Henry IV, a long, grey-haired, straggle-haired, sweating, cadaverous-looking King Henry IV. And apparently David had said, "Give me that man's name, I want to know who he is." And so when they had to replace an actor, he said, "I know who we want, that guy we saw in London in the theatre." And when I came face to face with David in Mexico City in his hotel room one afternoon, I walked into the room and he looked up and he said, "Yes?" Poor guy. Because this is what he got. You know?
Well, anyway, for what it was, you were great in the film, and it was
Thank you. It was a wonderful experience.
very exciting. Especially for that, at that time when everything pretty well much was practical. There was no CG. I mean, it was all, the film was all practical.
Pretty much so, yeah. I think entirely so. And David Lynch, a profoundly creative director, and a wonderful cast, some of which became my friends for life, Kyle MacLachlan, most notably. It introduced me to a different world of show business, and I was forever grateful for that, and the fact that David makes such a big mistake in casting me.
It's funny. One of your great roles, I was privileged to see, I'd say at least a couple times, maybe 3 times, was Scrooge. Christmas Carol. This was an amazing production. Can we just talk a little bit about that? It was so wonderful. And I note here that you won both the Drama Desk and the Olivier Awards for that, so congratulations on that.
Yes, thank you. You know, I tell my son, who is an actor, and who I'm happy to say should have been here this weekend, but he is in rehearsals with the Royal National Theatre Company in London, and that's why he's not here. So, good for him. He and I had dinner before I flew out here on Tuesday night, and he's having a great time. But I often say to him, what you have to understand is that our business depends on chance. It's like a lottery, how things happen to you. If I had not been assisting a Shakespeare scholar in a public lecture at UCLA back in 1986, I would never have been seen by the producers of Star Trek. It's that simple. And David Lynch casting me in Dune was the same. Well, Christmas Carol, which has played such a big part of my life, came about because my local parish church in Mirfield, in the West Riding of Yorkshire, where I had been a choir boy for several years, they were raising money to restore the organ in the church. And they asked me, could I put on some kind of entertainment in the church? Well, what was I going to do? You know, it was kind of awkward to come up with something that would be appropriate for a great Gothic church like my local parish church. And something happened to me at exactly this time. We were on location filming Lady Jane. It was Helena Bonham Carter's first movie. She was 17. And I was waiting to be called on the set one day. It was raining. And they said, we'll give you a call when we need you, but don't come out, it's not worth it. And so I read my newspaper, and I read all the other newspapers, and I sat around, and I wandered over to a bookshelf, and there was all the paperbacks that you always find in, you know, in the residence lounge of old country hotels. I always feel that there must be a depot somewhere where they buy these books, because they're always the same books that are in the bookshelves. And I was going on thinking, yeah, what can I find? And then I saw the slimmest volume on the bookshelf. And I thought, yeah, that'll be good. I pulled it out. And it was Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. And I almost put it back because I thought, I've read this. No, hang on a minute. I've seen the movie. Alistair said, I've never read it. Oh well, turn page 1. And about 5 hours later, I closed the book, having read it from cover to cover. And I was profoundly impressed by it, because it was something other than what I thought Christmas Carol always was. A sweet, cute story about Christmas time. And of course, it's much, much more than that. It's a great piece of social criticism, if nothing else. And I thought, this is what I could do for the Organ Restoration Fund. I could read a section of A Christmas Carol. It was December. So I edited the book. Nothing like enough, as it turned out. and the reading lasted over 3 hours. And it was a reading, there was no acting involved, no performance. And a very full church sat there on those wooden pews, hour after hour, and listened to this tale. And I was very impressed that if one guy up on the edge of the choir, reading from a book and not really connecting directly with the audience, could hold an audience's attention so well for that time, maybe I should investigate this further. And that's how Christmas Carol began.
And it was amazing, and I think people all over the world still recognize what a great achievement that was. But we're so tight on time. Let's just talk just a second about your amazing stint with the X-Men. We were talking before about what an amazing kind of closure you had on the movie Logan, which was such an exquisite piece of work. And you were so great, and you and Hugh are so incredible together, and you and Ian are so incredible together. Just give us a few words about your run in that franchise and what an amazing experience it was, because it was amazing for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam, very much. Yes, what a great privilege to have been part of that franchise. But again, that was something that nearly didn't happen because it was offered to me and I turned it down.
Why?
Well, and some of you may not like the sound of this, but you've got to try to see it from my point of view. It was some years after, not many, a handful of years after Star Trek and the movies, and I was already experiencing that not everything that came out of my world of Captain Picard was good, because I found that competing for other roles was challenging. As one director said to me, listen, you're a terrific actor. I like your work very much, but why would I want Captain Picard in my movie? So I realized I had a bit of a battle to fight, to persuade people that I was not just Jean-Luc Picard. I'm very proud to be Jean-Luc Picard, but I certainly didn't need to have it dominate my life. And I said, no, I am already struggling a little bit with one franchise. Why would I take on a second franchise? Because there was every indication that's what X-Men will become.
Ooh, yeah.
And so that was my response, and my agents passed that on, and then I got a phone call from Bryan Singer saying, we need to talk. And he took me out to lunch, and smooth talking bastard that he is.
So talented.
And really so talented,
so talented,
and gifted. And again, another person who has become the dearest, dearest of friends. He turned me around, and you know, the rest was what, 6 movies I think in total I appeared in, and again, you know, and that's what so much of my career means to me, the creation of wonderful friendships.
And you and Ian, I mean, you two had a chance to stretch out together so much in that franchise. You were so amazing, the two of you together.
It brought us
So
together. We'd known one another, known of one another for years, though Ian had been a star in the English theatrical community for many, many years. Ian McKellen was a star before he left university. He'd already been spotted.
Yeah.
And I was actually, quite honestly, rather intimidated by him. He was so brilliant, he was so gorgeous. I mean, he still is.
He really is.
Of course. But, oh, you should have seen him as a 25-year-old. And he was clever and popular and all the things I felt I wasn't. So I didn't get to know him at all. I stayed clear of him. Also, I was a big fan of his work. But then time came around, and there we were in Toronto, with sharing adjoining luxury trailers, waiting to go on the set. And that's what you do on movies like that. You wait to go on the set. Spend much more time in your trailer than you actually do on the set. And we would knock on the door of one another's trailers and take a coffee or a cup of tea, and we began talking. And we found we had a huge amount in common. The love of Shakespeare just being one of them. And that we're both Northerners, but he is a Lancastrian and I am a Yorkshireman. And that's how it began. And then a good few years ago, Ian's good friend and one-time partner, Sean Matthias, and Ian, they plotted to do a new production of Waiting for Godot, and they asked me to play in it with them. And that's when our real working relationship began in the theatre. But by then, of course, we'd already made, what, 4 X-Men movies? I'm not sure.
So you guys have a great vocabulary between you, and it's a beautiful shorthand. We're going to start talking about the next generation, and everybody wants to talk all about that, but I do shed a tear at the passing of Blunt Talk. I loved that show. I really did. You were magnificent. You really were. It really was a pretty perfect vehicle for you, let's face it. It's so great. Such a great show. No, I don't want to bring you down or anything, I'm just saying it was a great accomplishment.
Thank you, Adam, thank you. And I'm glad that some of you saw it. A lot of you saw it. It's something that none of us have quite recovered from. I'm serious, even though it's now 9 months since we were told, you're done. And I still don't know why. No one has been able to tell us why.
It's crazy.
After 2 seasons.
And Jonathan Ames is like a brilliant.
Brilliant
guy.
Brilliant.
He's brilliant.
And what a cast. What
the whole ensemble was great.
And great guests that we had on that show. Fantastic.
Daniel was on the show, which was fantastic.
My son.
It was so
my
great.
son.
It was so great. It was really great.
He was good.
He was good.
And well, it's gone. My battle at the moment, Adam, you will understand this, is the following. The series has not been seen in the UK. It has been sold overseas, not in the UK.
It's crazy.
Now, there are 4 quite well-known British actors in that series. Most notably, Adrian Scarborough, who was so dazzlingly brilliant as Harry.
What a pair you two made. You really did.
Well, it came from adoration. I'd loved Adrian's work for years. I'm proud to say it was his name that I mentioned to the producers. He put himself on tape, on his phone, and he got the role because he was born to play that role. And Dolly Wells, who played Celia in the show, and my son Daniel, and our senior director, executive producer was also an Englishman, and it has not been seen in the UK. And this, I think more than being cancelled, this disappoints me because I would love, I think that the quality of the humor in that show is something that would really appeal to British audiences. So,
very much so.
I have not given up the fight. I am still
so the opportunity to do Next Generation came to you, and you took the job, and there you were on the sets, and you began working on the show, and at that point Gene was still alive, and how much in control of production was he? Did he kind of keep a real steady hand on that, or would you see him every day there on the set? I know those first early episodes, some of which were, I feel, a little clumsy. The show was trying to find its standing, but how involved was Gene at that point?
Gene was very involved, and I think loving every moment of it. And he would come down on the set most days and hang out, and occasionally he'd bring along friends like President Reagan, or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff,
or Stephen Hawking.
Or Stephen Hawking, who appeared, of course, famously in an episode. And it was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who said to me on the bridge when he paid us a visit, may I sit in the captain's chair? The most important soldier in the United States is asking for permission to sit in the chair on a set. Very, very flattering. And also President Reagan was delightful too. And he would bring all kinds of interesting people to the set. And Gene and I did not have a close relationship. We had a respectful relationship. Gene had very strongly felt that I was wrong for the role and had opposed my casting.
We did not know that. I did not know that.
Oh yeah. I am told, and I don't know the details, but there was a lot of warfare that went on in the producers' offices about that. I was invited up to Gene's house one morning after I'd been seen by Robert Justman on the stage at Royce Hall in UCLA.
Justman picked you.
Yeah, Justman discovered me. And apparently, and his wife claimed this was true, at some point during this scholarly academic evening, he turned to his wife and said, "We found the captain." Gene saw me the next morning and profoundly disagreed. And I don't know what happened, because somebody wore him down, and finally I was cast by him and by the studio, by Paramount Pictures too. And I think I got the feeling that he was ultimately kind of satisfied with how it turned out.
I would think so. Now, what was your first impression of the ensemble? What was your takeaway on this amazing mercurial group of actors that you are now surrounded with?
Well, I was talking about intimidation, and that's what it felt like. I had never...
Who was intimidating who?
They were intimidating me.
I always thought it was the other way around.
No, sir. Well,
it became that.
It became that, and quite right too. Because, I mean, those guys needed keeping in line, and I was the one to do it.
They still behave that way, by the way. You know that.
Oh, they do. I know, and I love them for it. I had never been in front of a camera in the United States before, because Dune all filmed in Mexico, Churubusco Studios in Mexico City. So I was uncomfortable, I was nervous, I didn't have a lot of film experience, certainly not in playing a leading role. And there we were at Paramount Studios. And as a film buff from my earliest childhood, that meant so much to me. To drive through those gates onto that lot was, and actually was for every single day that I did that.
It's a pretty fabled place.
It was, and it is, and I loved learning the history of Paramount while I was there. But it was difficult. The first compliment I was paid, was by LeVar Burton. We were doing press before the pilot episode Encounter at Far Point. I'm still so impressed that I remember the titles of some of these episodes. We were doing interviews on the set. And I was sitting in a director's chair, and all this was new to me too. I'd never done this before. I didn't know how to comport myself. I didn't know how to behave. I didn't know what was okay to talk about or anything. But I tried to be as dignified and serious as possible. All that went, of course, in time. The dignity went, and seriousness went. But I finished the interview, and I hadn't realized that LeVar had been standing to one side listening to this interview. And he came over to me and he said, "Cucumber soup." And I said, "I'm sorry, beg your pardon." And he said, "Cucumber soup. You are as cool as cucumber soup."
You know that they're constantly eviscerating you when they're up on.
I know it. I know it's yeah, and
They have all
I
sorts
don't
of
want it
big
to
names
stop.
for you.
I know. Well, it makes them happy. We all struggle for a little bit of happiness in our lives. And my word, do these guys need it?
So many unbelievable guest actors on the show. I mean, I could just read a really short list, but I mean, you know, Leonard Nimoy and David Warner and your son and Whoopi, and I mean, it was just an endless procession of amazing acting talent on the show.
You know the one that really, really sticks in my mind? She did one episode, and when they told me she was cast, I could not believe it. That Gene Simmons would be a
Gene Simmons.
Little lady. And I mean, talk about intimidation. I went right back to that state again when I walked on the set with Gene Simmons. What a wonderful actress and with a great career behind her. But yeah, we had some truly outstanding.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It really, man, when I went back and kind of looked at that, I was just like, whoa, you know.
We were very, very lucky, and I think that there was a lot of respect being shown for Next Generation, albeit that in all of the major awards, television awards, Star Trek never featured in those creative departments once. In the technical departments, again and again and again, and we picked up countless Emmys and Golden Globes for that, but not a director, not a writer, not an actor.
When you consider the writers that came, particularly later on, I mean, Michael and what Michael did for the show,
Yeah.
and then so many of his students and alumni of that writers group.
But I have to show the respect to my union, because in the very first year that the Screen Actors Guild Awards came into being, the SAG Awards, I got a nomination. And it didn't take care of the problem. I mean, I think about the work that Brent Spiner did for 7 years. The complexity of that performance, the technical challenges of being Data, the scripts that he had to learn, the techno-babble that he had to learn. I mean, wearing that silver face every day for 7 years as well, and never acknowledged. And it still, to this day, leaves me speechless, because the acting excellence was evident in everything that he did. And it may be wrong for me to single out Brent, because everybody,
The whole ensemble was
the whole ensemble, and I always insisted, and I still do, we are an ensemble. There are no leading cast.
Even though they lean on you heavily because you bring a power and a gravitas to the role, at the same time, it always was an ensemble, and you guys always treated each other in that manner. That's one of the things that we love about you and respect. We're going to go to audience questions now, but before we do, would you fulfill a 30-year fantasy of mine?
What can that be?
Would you please do the Picard maneuver for me? I love it, and I just want to see you do it in person.
Hello, Sir Patrick.
Hello.
It's been a lifetime ambition of mine to introduce myself to you. My name is Patrick James Tiberius Kirk.
That's his real name.
Named after Patrick Bateman, of course. What I wanted to ask you is, I know that it's part of your work ethic to take roles only where the characters go through significant change and are in a different place at the end than they were at the beginning. So, with that in mind, my question is, what significant change has Jean-Luc Picard gone through by the end of the series? What did he have at the end of the series that he didn't have at the beginning?
A sense of humor. You know, I just realized, I do my own laundry, by the way. This is not a well-known detail about my life, but I do, and I love doing it. I don't iron, though. I don't iron shirts. I used to. My mother taught me how to iron, and I could do quite a good job. And you know, things don't work out. It's always something I can fall back on, ironing shirts. But I'm just looking at these trousers that I'm wearing. They shrank. I mean,
What the hell?
they look like drain pipe trousers, don't they? And I've only really just taken this on board. I washed them 2 days ago, and I realized I put them in the washer with my t-shirts and underwear and socks, and these should be washed cold. Do you know of any way in which you can unwash shoes?
Well, the fact that your pants are tight on you, I think is kind of sexy, honestly. Come on, I can have a man crush on him, you know, it's all right. He's a pretty beautiful looking guy, isn't he? Let's face it.
Thank you so much. Let's have another question.
Over there, please.
Good afternoon, Sir Patrick. As you can tell, I'm somewhat of a fan. So my mother went to a convention in Vancouver, Canada in 1989 where you were one of the guests. There you said at the panel that even though, Jean-Luc Picard loved Earl Grey tea, you did not, but you got dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of packages of Earl Grey tea every year. What I've always wanted to ask you, what did you do with all of it?
You know, I need to just talk about this for a moment, because that is the kind of in-depth, serious question that I really love to have. I mean, it's almost up there with Adam asking me to talk about my childhood. So thank you. That's a lie. I think if I said I didn't like Earl Grey tea, it was certainly a lie, because actually I do. And what I like to do is to mix Earl Grey tea with English breakfast. But you can't hold me to things that I said in 1989. Because I was so young in those days. But if you feel you've been misled, I apologize. But I know why I said it, and it was to try to stem the flood of Earl Grey tea back.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, Sir Patrick. You just had the opportunity to meet my son. Obviously, he was named after you. So I just wanted to thank you for the impact that you have had in my life, and clearly my son's life. And actors, especially with Jean-Luc Picard, and you played him for so many years, you had your own internal relationship with him. Yes, they gave you scripts, but you had to create the character and make it real. And here was a man who chose a career with no family, no children, which at times he reflected had he made the right choice or not with that, and he had for him. But here's Patrick Stewart in his own life with his son, with a wonderful relationship, as I have with mine. And you had both of those things inside of you. Could you reflect a little bit about being a parent and what having a son meant to you? Because we never had that opportunity with Jean-Luc Picard.
Wow.
Yes, Inner Light. Thank you, friend. There was one episode, of course, wasn't there? And it is, by the way, my favorite episode too. A most dazzlingly brilliant script that we all knew was something special. And indeed, it had my son in it as well, which is fabulous. The thing is with Jean-Luc Picard, that the longer I played him, the closer and closer I came to him, and he came to me. It reached a point where I no longer had to sit in my trailer and think, okay, so what did Jean-Luc have for breakfast this morning? And how does Jean-Luc feel about Commander Riker? Because I knew. It became ingrained, so that my responses and behavior on the set was one that was, as you have so rightly said, it was internalized. And I knew him well, and the character and the actor merged so totally that I could not, after that, separate them at all.
And I'm so pleased that we're going to do a segment tomorrow on the Inner Light. Tomorrow we're going to do an in-depth focus on that episode, the Inner Light, which Patrick is participating in.
And Daniel, my son, was supposed to be part of that, but he's in rehearsals in London, so I will try and fill in for him as well as for myself.
We'll have a good time.
We will.
Okay, Deanna.
Good afternoon, Sir Patrick. I am the mother who told the story about the Earl Grey tea.
Yes.
And I would never, ever disagree with the knight. My question actually goes back to that same convention that I attended in 1989. It was my first Star Trek convention, by the way. I also recall very fondly from that convention that you gave the audience an illustration of what your native Yorkshire accent was before you went to theater school and learned the sophisticated accent that we are all familiar with hearing. And you very kindly recited a poem that I believe was a child's poem that you remembered from your childhood. If your voice will allow, and if your raw throat will allow, would you please give us a bit more of an example of what your native Yorkshire accent was before it was sort of educated out of you?
Well, it's still there, it lurks inside me. The poem, you're right, it was a poem, but it was not my poem, it was a poem that my mother's sister recited every Christmas, because we were performers in my family. In fact, everybody in my community sang or recited or wrote or painted or did something. It was very creative. And my Auntie Annie would recite the same poem every Christmas. And it began something like this. I was sitting by the house last evening. My mother and father were off, because they'd yet to be out on Susanna. Well, laid up in bed with a cough. She's some brasses me out on Susanna. That's reason she's looked after sore. If they've not, well, then nought but a bother. There's a sample we owed Uncle Joe. My dear Auntie Annie, long gone, that my mother brought her to see me in a play once, a professional performance when I was now an actor in my local repertory theatre. And it was an unfortunate choice of play because it was written by a writer who did not pull his punches when it came down to strong language. My character in particular, who cursed and cursed and cursed all the way through this play. And this afternoon, when my mother was there with her sister, I heard quite clearly, as everyone else in the audience must have heard, just after one of my abusive outbursts, I heard my Auntie Annie say, that's never our Patrick."
Yeah.
Hello, Sir Patrick.
Hello.
I have a Star Trek Nemesis question, if that's okay. I mean, you know, Nemesis was the last movie that you made, and, you know, in the early stages of development, you know, right after they scripted the scripts, I mean, they had it in mind, Rick Berman had it in mind that you were going to play Picard, and you were going to play Shinzon too. And I thought that would have been a wonderful showcase of your acting talents to play Picard and Shinzon, hero and villain, in the same movie. And, you know, but I was just curious to know what you would have thought about playing hero and villain in Star Trek Nemesis.
Well, I have never heard that before. It's news to me. I mean, Rick Berman and I did discuss the casting of Shinzon. And hasn't that actor done well?
He's awesome. Oh my God. Tom Hardy's great.
Fabulous. You should get him.
Yeah, no, we'd love to.
You really should.
Did you check out Taboo, that series of his? Taboo?
Yes,
Oh my
yes, I
God.
have. It's extraordinary.
He's extraordinary.
And the movie Lock, where it all takes place with him driving a car and nothing else, is brilliant. Well, it would have been interesting, but there would have been a problem that he was meant to be many years younger than me, and I don't know how we could have done that, you know. It would have been difficult. But it's an interesting concept, but I don't think I would have been comfortable with it. Thank you. And you know, good musicians. Which leads me on to what I have to say, because I think our time is just about up. And the fact is that while I have been here, my wife has arrived in Las Vegas, and I haven't seen her for nearly 3 weeks. And I've got an hour's break, and I can go back to the hotel and see her beautiful face for the first time in 2 months. So